Margaret sat in her small apartment, watching the rain streak down the window. At 72, she had seen many storms in her life, but none quite like this one. The apartment was quiet now, filled only with the gentle tick of the clock on the mantel and the distant hum of traffic below. 3 months ago, her life had been completely different. She had lived in the sprawling Victorian house that had been in her family for generations. The house where she had raised her daughter Sarah, where her late husband Thomas had spent his final years, and where countless memories lived in every corner. Thomas had been gone for 2 years now. His passing had been peaceful, surrounded by love in the bedroom they had shared for 45 years of marriage. What Margaret hadn't expected was how his death would change everything between her and Sarah. The reading of the will had taken place on a crisp autumn morning. Margaret remembered sitting in the lawyer's office, her hands folded in her lap, expecting the usual formalities. Thomas had always handled their finances, but she assumed everything would simply pass to her. As was customary, Mr. Henderson, their family lawyer for decades, had cleared his throat nervously before beginning. Thomas made some specific arrangements, he had said, his voice careful and measured. Sarah had been there too, sitting beside her mother with an expression Margaret couldn't quite read. They had always been close, or so Margaret had thought. Sarah was 38, now successful in her career as a marketing executive, but she had never married or had children of her own. When Mr. Henderson announced that Thomas had left the house and $33 million to Sarah directly, the room fell silent. Margaret felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She had known Thomas was successful in his investments, but she had never imagined they were worth so much. Your husband wanted to ensure the family legacy continued, Mr. Henderson had explained. Gently, he felt Sarah was better positioned to manage such a substantial estate. Margaret had been left with a modest pension and some personal belongings. She remembered looking at Sarah, expecting to see shock, perhaps even embarrassment at the situation. Instead, her daughter's face showed something Margaret had never seen before: cold calculation. The weeks that followed were a blur of painful conversations and mounting tension. Margaret had assumed she would continue living in the family home, helping Sarah manage such an overwhelming inheritance. After all, it was the house where Sarah had grown up, where her grandmother's rose garden still bloomed each spring. But Sarah had other plans. "Mom, you have to understand," Sarah had said during one of their increasingly difficult conversations. "This is a new chapter for both of us. The house needs updating, and frankly, I think it's time you experience some independence." The word independence had stung. Margaret had never been dependent on anyone except Thomas, and even then, they had been partners in everything. Now suddenly, she was being treated like a burden. Sarah had been efficient in her arrangements. She found Margaret a small apartment across town, paid the deposit, and helped her pack her belongings. Throughout it all, she maintained a cheerful demeanor that felt increasingly hollow. "You'll love having your own space," Sarah had said, wrapping Margaret's china in newspaper. "No more worrying about maintaining such a big house. Think of all the freedom you'll have." But Margaret didn't want freedom from the life she had built. She wanted to tend her garden, to sit in the breakfast nook where she and Thomas had shared their morning coffee, to feel connected to the decades of love that had filled those rooms. The move happened quickly. One day, Margaret was living in the house where she had spent most of her adult life, and the next she was staring at beige walls and wondering how her relationship with her only child had become so distant. Sarah visited occasionally in those first weeks, bringing groceries and making polite conversation, but there was a wall between them now, built from hurt feelings and unspoken resentments. Margaret tried to make the best of her new situation. She joined a book club at the local library and started volunteering at a nearby food bank. The days passed slowly, but she began to find a rhythm in her new life. It was on a Thursday morning, exactly 3 months after moving out, that her phone rang. Mom. Sarah's voice was different, strained and desperate in a way Margaret hadn't heard since her daughter was a child. Yes, dear, I need your help. The words came out in a rush. Can you come over, please? I don't know what to do. Margaret found Sarah sitting at the kitchen table in the family home, surrounded by stacks of papers and looking smaller than she had in years. Her confident facade had crumbled, replaced by the vulnerability of someone who had discovered they were in over their head. I don't understand any of this, Sarah said, gesturing at the documents spread before her. The lawyers are saying there are tax implications I never considered. There are investment portfolios that need management, property taxes, insurance issues. Mom, I made some terrible decisions. Margaret sat down slowly, taking in the scene. Her daughter, who had been so eager to take control just months before, was drowning in responsibilities she hadn't anticipated. I thought having money would make everything easier, Sarah continued, tears starting to fall. But every day there's something new. People calling with investment opportunities, distant relatives I've never heard of asking for loans, tax attorneys explaining things I don't understand. Margaret reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. Why didn't you call sooner? Sarah's voice broke. Because I was so awful to you. I was so caught up in the idea of being wealthy, of being important, that I forgot what really mattered. I forgot that Dad left me this money because he trusted me to take care of our family. That includes taking care of you. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past months settling between them. I miss having you here, Sarah whispered. I miss talking to you about everything. I miss your advice. I miss feeling like we were a team. Margaret squeezed her daughter's hand. I'm still here, Sarah. I've always been here. Over the following hours, they talked through everything. Sarah had made some impulsive investments that were performing poorly. She had trusted the wrong financial advisors and found herself committed to obligations she didn't fully understand. Most importantly, she had realized that money without family meant very little. I want to make this right, Sarah said as the afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen windows. I want you to come home. This house needs you. I need you. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. Are you sure this is your house now? No, Sarah said firmly. This is our family home. It always has been. Dad might have left it to me legally, but it belongs to all of us. Our memories, our history, our love, that can't be transferred with a piece of paper. They spent the evening going through the financial documents together. Margaret discovered she had more wisdom about money management than she had realized. Years of running a household, managing budgets, and listening to Thomas discuss his business had given her insights that Sarah desperately needed. More importantly, they began to rebuild their relationship. They talked about Thomas, sharing memories, and grief they had been carrying alone. They discussed the future, making plans that included both of their dreams and concerns. As the sun set that day, Margaret found herself back in her old bedroom, unpacking the belongings she had thought she might never see in this house again. Sarah helped, chattering excitedly about changes they could make together, improvements that would honor the house's history while making it work for both of them. The inheritance had nearly torn them apart, but ultimately it taught them both what truly mattered. Not the money itself, but the love, wisdom, and support they could offer each other. That night, Margaret sat in her familiar breakfast nook, looking out at the rose garden she had tended for decades. Tomorrow, she and Sarah would begin the real work of building their future together, not as an heiress and her dependent mother, but as a family united by something far more valuable than money. The rain had stopped, and through the window, Margaret could see the first stars beginning to appear in the clearing sky.